Hello everyone. Welcome to today's educational science presentation on Mendellian genetics, specifically focusing on the concept of the monohybrid cross. This colorful journey will help us understand how traits are passed from one generation to the next. Let's dive into the fascinating world of genetics. By the end of this session, you'll be able to predict simple ratios of offspring genotypes and phenotypes in crosses involving dominant and recessive gene pairs. This is a foundational skill in understanding heredity and variation. Let's start with the man behind it all, Gregor Mendel. In 1866, this Austrian monk conducted groundbreaking experiments with pea plants. Through self-fertilization and cross-pollination, Mendel discovered patterns in inheritance that laid the foundation for modern genetics. That's why he's known as the father of genetics. Mendel chose garden pea plants for his experiments because they had easily observable traits, such as seed color and plant height. They also reproduced quickly and could be easily controlled for pollination, making them ideal for genetic studies. A trait is a physical characteristic passed from one generation to the next, like seed color. Traits are controlled by genes, which can exist in different forms called alleles. For example, the gene for seed color has two alleles: yellow, Y, and green, Y. The combination of these alleles determines the trait that is expressed. Alleles can be dominant or recessive. A dominant allele, like yellow, Y, will always show up if present. A recessive allele, like green, Y, only appears if both alleles are recessive. So, we have three combinations: YY, homozygous dominant, yellow, YY, heterozygous, yellow, YY, homozygous recessive, green. Now let's talk about genotype and phenotype. The genotype is the genetic makeup, the combination of alleles. The phenotype is the physical expression of that genotype. For example, a plant with genotype YY has a phenotype of yellow seeds because the dominant allele masks the recessive one. A monohybrid cross involves two individuals that differ in one trait. This helps us understand how a single trait is inherited across generations. Let's solve a classic monohybrid cross problem. We'll cross a tall pea plant with a dwarf pea plant and observe the F1 and F2 generations. The tall plant is dominant, and the dwarf plant is recessive. When we cross them, all offspring in the F1 generation are tall. But what's happening genetically? The tall parent has genotype TT, and the dwarf parent has TT. Their gametes are T and T, respectively. When combined, all F1 offspring have genotype TT, heterozygous tall. Now, let's self-pollinate the F1 generation to produce the F2 generation. Each F1 plant has genotype TT, so the gametes are T and T. Using a Punnett square, we get the following combinations: TT, 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 and TT. From this, we get phenotypic ratio, 3 tall, 1 dwarf. Genotypic ratio, 1 TT, 2 TT, 1 TT. So, in the F2 generation, 75% of the plants are tall, and 25% are dwarf. Genetically, we have 1 homozygous tall, 2 heterozygous tall, and 1 homozygous dwarf. That wraps up our discussion on Mendellian genetics and the monohybrid cross. Understanding these basic principles helps us grasp how traits are inherited and why offspring can look different from their parents. Thank you for joining me today, and I hope you found this session enlightening.